See enough and write it down, I tell myself. And then some morning when the world seems drained of wonder, someday when I'm only going through the motions of doing what I am supposed to do, which is right. On that bankrupt morning, I will simply open my notebook and there it will all be, a forgotten account with accumulated interest. Paid passage back to the world out there. It all comes back. Remember what it is to be me. That is always the point.
And I am very pleased to have her join us now, especially at this time.
Joan Didion was one of the greatest writers of all time, and she was also a keen note-taker, and I don't think this is a coincidence. I think part of the reason why she was such an insightful writer was to do with the fact that she was such a keen note-taker. Didion's journals, when she passed, went to auction for $11K. Bear in mind, these were empty journals. Now, a lot of people take notes. I take notes. I'm sure at some point in your lives you've taken notes too. I'm quite an avid note taker, but I've done this without really questioning why I actually do it, what the point is. And let me give you an example. I collect my thoughts in various notebooks, apps like Obsidian, after reading a book or watching a film, or dare I say, even after listening to an interesting conversation. It wasn't until I read the wonderful, wonderful essay by Joan Didion on keeping a notebook. This is when I truly understood why I do it, and it finally clicked. Why notes are so useful. Understanding our relationship with note-taking can of course change the act itself, but I'd go as far as to say it can change the way you live life. Without this understanding, our notes are often forgotten and disregarded the moment a book ends. Knowing why we take notes can influence the way we engage with the practice, as well as the attention we pay to our actual lives. Joan Didion shows us that note-taking isn't just about recording information. It's about having this deeper awareness of ourselves, our present self, our past selves, and who we might also become. Note-taking is a very, very personal practice, and that's why I'm not here to tell you how to take notes, but more, if we know our why, we will understand how we want to go about doing it. I want to explore why we take notes according to Joan Didion. I think she has some really interesting insights, so here's what I learned from her words. Why do we take notes? I've always taken notes. I have plenty of notes in lost journals, lost to the cloud on my phone. Some I'll simply never revisit, and some I do think about more regularly. What I see, I write down. I rearrange my life into paragraphs, chapters, and try to make sense of it. Squash reality into words. An impossible task, but one I'll take on, and one I do take on time and time again. Notes are a forgotten account of all things. There's no strict structure. Instead, it's a hard and fast flow of words that sit at the edges of my temple. A temporary crowning of the brow until they solidify into ink or pixel on a page. There is a point to these words. Joan Didion wrote on keeping a notebook. It is a good idea to keep in touch, and I suppose that keeping in touch is what notebooks are all about. I think we are all well advised to keep on nodding terms with the people we used to be, whether we find them attractive company or not. Remember what it is to be me. That is always the point. So I find myself between the prose I write, a different self, a former self. But I'm always coming back to myself, not forgetting her. That's the point of notes. Mending my past and future together with the stitches of words written in a notebook. A new note catches my attention and immediately I am taken. A useful accident of assorted thoughts speaking to me from the past. I nod, compelled to write upon old notes, to ask new questions attached to older ones. Perhaps the answer has changed, or maybe the answer is now in my life. There's this ongoing conversation I am having with all of myselves, a delicious anticipation of the newer self, what she might know, what she will remember, what she will forget. You see, memory is a funny thing. It's like looking into the ocean. It appears transparent. But beneath the waves, an unknown world floats and swims, leaving only distortions behind, fragmenting light. It isn't to say that I'm not delighted with life. It delights me in ways, and it frightens me in other ways. I cannot take it at face value. I sit with it, let myself steam in its heat until I sweat and force out words. Sometimes I'm afraid to go to sleep, and sometimes I'm afraid to wake up. The keeping of notes is not an attempt at sealing reality into pages, but sealing parts of myself into time, to freeze who I was. It's a record of feeling. How did the first signs of spring feel? Is spring the same for me this year? Or am I somehow changed, evolved? It's a memory of memory, sieved through the holes of time, fragments kept alive by the eyes of their author. Thinking this is where it begins. I begin and end in the words I have shared with others. Conversations that unknowingly changed us. Words that ought to have been used and words that were used instead. Words that replaced play, replaced joy, replaced the connection. Then, of course, the kind words. The words we ought not to forget, but are harder to find amongst the rest. The words that remind you there was a before and is an after. Words that have defined us. Didion said, "Your notebook will never help me nor mine you. It is a private act, like the spilling of the mind's contents into a tangible, seeable thing, for the eyes of you and you alone. To remember."